Robert Ernst taught aerobics classes in the morning and ran marathons on the weekends near his home outside Fort Worth, Texas. At 59, he was, in the eyes of everyone who knew him, a healthy man. When his hands began to ache from arthritis in the fall of 2000, his doctor prescribed a new painkiller that was being advertised on television every night. Millions of Americans were already taking it, and Ernst began taking one pill a day to ease his pain. On the morning of May 6, 2001, his heart slipped out of rhythm and stopped beating. He died in his sleep. The company that made that painkiller was Merck, one of the most respected drug makers in the world. What Merck did not say publicly, it had already admitted in private. More than a year before Robert Ernst ever filled his prescription, the head of Merck's research labs had put the danger in writing in an internal email. And by the time Ernst died, the company had already concocted a plan to deal with the scientists and doctors who were starting to ask questions. The drug that killed Robert Ernst was designed to solve a real problem. Older painkillers like naproxen and ibuprofen work by blocking two enzymes in the body at once. One of those enzymes drives pain and inflammation. The other protects the lining of the stomach. Both enzymes also act on the blood, and they pull in opposite directions. The pain enzyme helps keep the blood from clotting, while the stomach enzyme helps blood clot. When the old drugs block both enzymes, the blood effects roughly cancel out, and what's left is the damage to the stomach lining. That is why years of heavy painkiller use sent tens of thousands of people to the hospital with ulcers and internal bleeding. By the mid-1990s, Merck set out to fix that. The plan was to block only the pain enzyme and leave the stomach enzyme untouched. It worked, but there was a catch. Blocking only the pain enzyme removed the signal that kept the blood from clotting. Merck called the drug Vioxx. The FDA approved Vioxx in the spring of 1999, and within a year it was one of the best-selling drugs in America. But inside the approval file was a warning that almost no one saw. An FDA medical officer named Maria Villalba had reviewed Merck's own pre-approval data and noticed that patients on Vioxx were having cardiovascular complications at roughly 3 times the rate of patients who were not taking it. Villalba wrote that the data made it impossible to say with certainty whether the risk was real, as the test size was small and the study had not been built to scrutinize effects on the heart. To prove that Vioxx was gentler than the older painkillers, Merck ran a large trial called Vigor. 8,000 patients took either Vioxx or naproxen, and the study was designed to measure stomach safety, not the effects on the heart. The results came back in late 1999, and they were not what Merck wanted. Patients on Vioxx were having far more heart attacks than patients on naproxen. The independent board monitoring the trial called the trend disconcerting, but noted that the number of events was still small and voted to let the study continue. Merck and the board also agreed to count heart problems only up to a cutoff date of February 2000. At the time, that looked like a routine piece of study methodology. Then, on March 9, 2000, Merck's head of research put his concerns in writing. Edward Skolnick, the president of Merck Research Laboratories, emailed his colleagues that the cardiovascular events were, in his words, clearly there. He called it a shame. He wrote that the risk was mechanism-based, as they had worried it was. In plain terms, the danger came from the way the drug worked, not from chance. Merck researchers were quietly discussing whether they could reformulate Vioxx by adding a second drug to counteract the clotting. You do not redesign a drug to fix a problem you believe does not exist. In public, Merck said something else entirely. That April, weeks after Skolnick's email, the company announced that the Vigor results confirmed the favorable cardiovascular safety profile of Vioxx. When Merck submitted those same vigor results to the New England Journal of Medicine, 3 heart attacks in the Vioxx group were missing from the data. All 3 had happened after the February cutoff. An internal memo from a Merck statistician to one of the paper's authors referred to them plainly as heart attacks 18, 19, and 20. The paper was published in November 2000, and it reported that Vioxx patients had more than 4 times the risk of heart attack compared to naproxen. With the 3 missing cases counted, the real figure was closer to 5 times. That same month, Robert Ernst filled his first prescription for Vioxx. In February 2001, Merck brought its defense to an FDA advisory committee. The company argued that the heart attacks in Vigor were not caused by Vioxx doing harm, but by naproxen doing good. In this telling, naproxen protected the heart so powerfully that it accounted for the entire gap between the 2 groups, which meant Vioxx itself was harmless. An FDA reviewer named Sherry Targum had already tested that idea against the evidence and found nothing to support it. The committee voted unanimously that doctors needed to be told about the heart risks of prescribing Vioxx. That spring, Robert Ernst's heart stopped in the night, 6 months after he had filled his first prescription. That summer, cardiologists at the Cleveland Clinic published their own analysis, finding that Vioxx roughly tripled the risk of serious cardiovascular events. One of them, Eric Topol, had asked Merck for its data. A senior Merck scientist paid him a visit and warned that he would be embarrassed if he published his findings. In September 2001, the FDA sent Merck's chief executive an 8-page warning letter. It said Merck had run a promotional campaign that minimized the serious cardiovascular findings in Vigor, and it ordered the company to stop promoting Vioxx. Merck did not stop. It trained its 3,000 sales representatives to steer doctors away from the heart question. There was an internal document built for exactly this tactic, titled Dodgeball Vioxx. Its early pages listed the questions a physician might ask, including concern about the cardiovascular effects, and marked each one as an obstacle. Its final pages carried a single word repeatedly, dodge. When a doctor pressed, the representative was to say only that they could not discuss the study and then hand over a card claiming Vioxx was many times safer than its competitors. FDA scientists would later testify to Congress that the card's relevance to real heart safety was non-existent. Doctors who criticized the drug in public were tracked and threatened. Merck kept a list of them, with names to be neutralized or discredited. A 1999 company email about such critics read, "We may need to seek them out and destroy them where they live." For 3 more years, Vioxx stayed on the market and kept selling. By 2003, it was earning Merck about $2.5 billion a year. Then the company's own research undid it. Merck ran a separate trial called Approve, testing whether Vioxx could prevent colon polyps. And this time the drug was measured against a placebo rather than another painkiller. That was the one comparison Merck had avoided for the heart question, and it left nothing to blame but the drug itself. After 18 months on Vioxx, patients were having about twice as many heart attacks and strokes as patients on the sugar pill. The trial's safety board recommended stopping the trial, and on September 30th, 2004, Merck withdrew Vioxx from the market worldwide. The FDA had not ordered the stoppage. By then, around 20 million Americans had taken the drug, and 2 million were taking it the day it was withdrawn. Merck's stock lost about a quarter of its value in a single day, close to $26 billion. 7 weeks later, the story moved to a Senate hearing room. David Graham had worked at the FDA for 20 years in the office responsible for catching exactly this kind of danger. On November 18, 2004, he sat in front of the Senate Finance Committee and called Vioxx the single greatest drug safety catastrophe in the history of this country or the history of the world. His estimate was that the drug had caused between 88,000 and 139,000 excess heart attacks in the United States alone, and that 30 to 40% of them were probably fatal. Those numbers were never a confirmed count of the dead. They are a statistical estimate. Merck has never accepted them, and no investigation ever produced an exact figure. But somewhere inside that range was a man from Texas who ran marathons and took the pill for his aching hands. Graham had not reached that hearing easily. Inside the FDA, his own superiors had tried to keep his research from being published. When a British medical journal prepared to run his study, the acting head of the FDA's drug center called the editor to raise doubts about the data. Other FDA officials called Graham's work irresponsible and called it junk science. The science, however, was not complicated. The same selectivity that let Vioxx spare the stomach also tipped the blood toward clotting, and clots are what cause most heart attacks and strokes. The very feature Merck had built the drug around was the one that made it dangerous. In 2005, the New England Journal of Medicine took the rare step of publicly questioning the vigor paper it had published, noting that 2 of the authors had known about the missing heart attacks months before the article ran. Its editor said the journal had been, in his word, hoodwinked. In Congress, a House committee worked through more than 20,000 pages of Merck's internal documents. The dodgeball file was in there, and so were the marketing campaigns with names like offense and acceleration used to push the drug. When it was over, no one at Merck was charged with a crime. The company itself pleaded guilty in 2011 to a single misdemeanor for promoting Vioxx for a use the FDA had not approved and paid roughly $1 billion. It paid nearly $5 billion more to settle the injury claims of some 47,000 people, while admitting no fault. Edward Skolnick, who had written the internal email stating the danger of Vioxx was clearly there, was never charged and went on to a long second career in medical research. David Graham kept his job at the FDA and spent the rest of it on the margins. The first of those 47,000 cases to reach a jury belonged to Robert Ernst. In August 2005, his widow, Carol, sat in a courtroom in Angleton, Texas, and listened as a jury found Merck responsible for her husband's death and awarded her $253 million. A Texas appeals court later erased the verdict entirely. It ruled there was not enough evidence to prove that a blood clot from Vioxx was what had stopped Robert Ernst's heart. It was the same thing no one had been able to say on the morning he died in his sleep at 59. That's the report on the Vioxx heart attack scandal. Thanks for watching Cold Wreckage.